Okay, thank you so much, Steve, and thank you to the East Hampton Library for partnering with us on this presentation. Uh, Tonight, I am going to be talking about dementia, what it is, what Alzheimer's disease is, other types of dementia. But before we get into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Parker Jewish Institute, because we are deeply involved in a dementia grant from the New York State Department of Health, which began approximately 5.5 years ago, as dementia is a global health issue. So we were fortunate enough to get approved for the grant, as are several organizations in New York State. We cover Nassau and Suffolk counties primarily. So a little bit about Parker, who we are, a major health and rehabilitation center. We're here in New Hyde Park, just off of Lakeville Road. A lot of people think that we're connected to Northwell because we're kind of on the same campus, but we're not. We are a not-for-profit organization, as well as a standalone nursing home with a 527-bed occupancy. We also offer a comprehensive system of post-acute care, including short-term rehab, nursing, and medical services. In addition, we have a diversified network of outpatient services, from a social adult day program, home health care program, which includes long-term home health care and certified home health care. We have a hospice program, a research and grant division, which I am a part of, a pharmacy, physician services, a renal institute. So we have people that come here specifically for dialysis. And we also have a Lakeville transportation ambulette that works out of one of our daycare centers, as well as A12 New York. So Parker itself was actually founded in 1907 in Harlem, in Manhattan, by a small group of people who wanted to provide shelter for the indigent in their community. Since then, we have grown exponentially and become a true innovator in the design of specialized programs for older adults. We do serve as a very powerful Alzheimer's disease advocate on behalf of New Yorkers, working with a myriad of community organizations to provide those needed services. And we have continued to expand continuously throughout our history to meet those needs. So what began as a very, very small operation has grown into, quite an extensive enterprise. And our mission is to provide compassion and dedication in the healthcare field, whether it be rehabilitation or, in the case of what I'm going to be talking about tonight, a research grant that is designed to provide all sorts of free services to people suffering from dementia, and equally as important, their caregivers. What is dementia? Some people know, some people don't. Dementia is the umbrella term that we use for numerous cognitive issues. Those issues include a wide range of symptoms that are associated with a decline in cognitive functioning. And when cognitive decline is severe enough to interfere with daily living, it becomes a dementia diagnosis. There are all sorts of cognitive decline that happen with aging. It's not always dementia. Sometimes it is. However, 50% of people over the age of 85 will more than likely receive a dementia diagnosis because it's pretty much basically an aging brain. So there are different types of dementia, Alzheimer's disease being the most prevalent. 40%, 40 to 70% of all dementia cases are Alzheimer's. That is what, of course, most people are familiar with. There is also something called vascular dementia, which is also very common, accounting for about 15 to 25% of all dementias. Vascular dementia is when the veins that deliver the oxygen to the brain are, no longer functioning optimally. Then there's also Lewy body dementia, which accounts for about 2 to 20% of all dementia cases. Lewy body dementia are small deposits that can be seen on an MRI that cause the cognitive decline. Frontotemporal dementia, 2 to 4% of all dementia. That sometimes happens with a stroke. It can also happen with traumatic brain injury. Parkinson's disease can cause dementia, Huntington's disease, head trauma, HIV, alcohol-related dementia, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is a corticobasal degeneration, and progressive supranuclear palsy. So there's a lot of types of dementia out there. And the symptoms can vary greatly, and people experience dementia differently as well. However, at least 2 of the following core mental functions must be significantly impaired in order for someone to receive a diagnosis. That being memory, communication and language, ability to focus and pay attention, reasoning and judgment, and visual perception. So for example, ability to focus and pay attention. I have worked with a number of people who have dementia. I had a relative who is in later stages now. And one of the first things that happened was that I noticed was when you're having a conversation with another human being, there is a thread of communication that gets established in that conversation. And someone who is starting to show symptoms of dementia is going to have difficulty keeping that thread. They're going to kind of look like they might not be listening, even though they're looking at you. Visual perception. One of the things that also happens to someone who in earlier stages of dementia, when they're driving, they can kind of have a difficulty with perception and processing the understanding, say, oh, that's a green light, that's a red light. There's a slowness that happens there. So their perception changes, whereas normally when we're all driving, we're kind of on autopilot. In some cases, dementia is caused by treatable medical conditions. Some of those issues could be what is classified as delirium or depression, a vitamin B12 deficiency, drug interactions, and hypothyroidism. So, for example, I have a personal friend who started taking beta blockers a few years ago because she had a problem with her heart. And we were chatting the other day and she said, you know, I think I have dementia. And I said, well, you really have to talk to your doctor because you could be having a side effect to the medication. It doesn't necessarily, just because your symptoms seem like dementia doesn't mean that you have it. But we're going to take a closer look at delirium and depression for now. Delirium being a state of confusion that can come on very suddenly and last for several hours up to a few days. Those symptoms have it being difficulty focusing and thinking clearly. And the causes can be medication, again, side effects to that medication, a lack of sleep, or an infection. one of the things that we see, especially in the elderly, very often they become susceptible to a UTI, a urinary tract infection, and that can cause delirium and agitation. And then people wind up in the ER, and then they find out that it's a UTI, and they get some antibiotics, and the whole situation lifts. So often onset during a hospitalization, a rehab stay, or another unfamiliar environment, because it's a big change for an older person, and they're delicate, and it can become very agitating to them psychologically. Depression being a mood disorder that causes serious symptoms that affect how you feel and how you think. When those symptoms are serious enough that they affect everyday functioning, you get a diagnosis of depression. And it also can cause thinking and memory problems. It can appear very similar to dementia. Alzheimer's disease, being the most prevalent form of dementia, is a progressive and degenerative disease. It affects daily functioning, causing those issues with memory, thinking, and behavior, and represents, again, 60 to 80% of the diagnoses, most commonly in people over 65. And here is an illustration of a healthy brain on the left and advanced Alzheimer's. And so what's happening is the brain is actually shrinking, almost drying out in a way. The typical onset for dementia is 65. Alzheimer's disease is not considered to be part of the normal aging process. So we do have cases. There are younger onset cases. They're called early onset cases. And it's kind of rare, but people that do have that usually can show symptoms as early as in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. In the United States, it is estimated that there are about 200,000 people that have early onset. We actually have a few clients here that I've met with, and it's really tough. It's really difficult because in a lot of these cases, you see, you know, a man or a woman in their late 50s recently becoming an empty nester, being a very high functioning, successful person, and they have the onset of an illness, and it's very tough, really, really tough on the spouse and tough on the person in the beginning as well. There are 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's disease, that being memory loss, that really starts to disrupt your daily life. We all have memory loss. We forget where we put our keys. We forgot we had that appointment because we didn't write it down. It's a little bit, you know, it's deeper than that. Things like planning or solving problems become challenging. Okay, so there's like a processing difficulty that's going on there. Familiar tasks at home, work, or leisure become difficult to complete. There's also a confusion with time and place, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. That goes back to what I was saying about driving. New problems with words and speaking or writing. So, for example, my experience with it with a family member is I was calling, you know, calling this person up to talk about their vacation, and they had just gone to Alaska. And I said, "How was your vacation?" "Oh, it was so great. It was so beautiful. And we were on this boat and on, and we saw those things. You know, those things. What are those things?" And I said, "Are you talking about whales?" And he said, "Yes, whales." So like a word that would easily be on the tip of your tongue becomes no longer available. Misplacing things and not being able to retrace the steps, right? So we all misplace things, we forget where we put things down, but we can usually say, okay, wait, first I went here, then I went here, then I went there. Decreased or poor judgment, withdrawal from work or social activities. People start to feel isolated when this happens because they're not processing things in the same way. Their inner life is radically starting to change. And of course, that's going to affect their mood and their personality. There is no cure officially to stop or slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease. However, there are a lot of medications out there that are available to treat symptoms and behaviors. And, you know, we did hear about some very groundbreaking news over the last year about a new medication for Alzheimer's that they are alleging through a research study that if you catch it early enough, it can arrest the development of the disease, the progression of the disease. I don't know. I don't think they have enough information, you know, proof really on that yet. That medication is called aducanumab. But these medications here, Aricept, Razidine, Namenda, Exelon, and Nemzaric, treat the symptoms and behaviors. So a person experiencing symptoms of dementia should first really be seen by their physician so that they can get a comprehensive evaluation in order to determine a diagnosis. We always, you know, in the health field, you really want to get the diagnosis first because that diagnosis is going to send you down the right path for treatment. And it can be complicated. It has to include ruling out other causes of cognitive changes, as we mentioned before. Diagnosing dementia is a process and may require follow-up appointments with the physician to get an accurate diagnosis, including that being a complete health exam, a physical exam, a neurological assessment. That's really, really important. Mental status assessment, blood and urine analysis, what's going on in the body, chemically, physically, electrocardiogram, and a CT or an MRI. And early diagnosis is really the most important thing. So when you start to see these kinds of symptoms, as difficult as it is, it's really important to start documenting because that diagnosis is going to give that person an opportunity to plan for the future and how they want to organize their treatment and you know, how things are going to unfold in the future so that you can be prepared. And it also gives you time to access community resources and supports, places like Parker Jewish Institute, places like your local public library that so many libraries, especially before the pandemic, were holding all sorts of support groups for the caregivers so that they could meet other people and collaborate on what this journey is like. In addition, there are always clinical trials going on. You know, that's a decision you make on your own. We do have a client who did find a very interesting clinical trial. I haven't heard the outcome yet, but it definitely sounded very interesting. You have to do your research. So now we're going to turn to the caregiver. In most cases, the caregiver is a spouse. If not, it's the rest of the family. So in 2018 alone, more than 16 million family and friends provided more than 18 billion hours of unpaid assistance to those with dementia, whether it be Alzheimer's or anything else. a contribution that the nation values at $234 billion. So this tells you, this is part of why this grant came about, because studies have shown that caregivers are the people that really experience the burnout. When, as someone who is progressing in their illness starts to lose contact of time and what's going on and where they are, it's not as disturbing to them or as painful or as taxing as it is to that caregiver who, used to have a very high functioning person who was available for all sorts of support and has now become very, deeply dependent. Studies have shown that, nearly half of caregivers have an income of $50,000 or less. This is something that happens usually later in life. So people are on limited incomes, and those who are still working wind up losing annual income as a result of having to adapt their schedule to meet the demands of being a caregiver. So that's really where we step in with the Dementia Grant. We call it Willing Hearts, Helpful Hands, Caregiver Support Initiative. So that's our title here at Parker Jewish, and we provide an array of free services to caregivers, including family care consultations. We always start with a home visit with a licensed social worker to make the assessment, to make sure that everything is safe for that person, and also to make sure that the house is safe for the volunteers that we also provide, who are going to make friendly visits so that that caregiver can step off and get some respite, and also so that the care recipient, the person with the diagnosis, can receive additional social stimulation, a new face, a new mood, a new conversation, a new topic to talk about. One of the upsides to this illness is that people do retain their long-term memory for quite some time. So one of the things that we try to focus on is reminiscing. And reminiscing can be really fun. People love to talk about happier times in their lives, the history, their schooling, their family, their friends, their travels, their hobbies. The interesting thing, additionally, that I find fascinating is that they do not forget music. My relative who has dementia can still play the piano. It's pretty amazing. So we're providing volunteers, support groups, educational webinars like this, training to our volunteers, training programs, online training programs to educate the caregivers about the illness. We offer scholarships up to $1,800 per semester, so to speak, that can be used towards respite for you, meaning the caregiver, the volunteer visits, and of course, joint enrichment programs. A family care consultation is, when that social worker comes to the house and provides the support and starts to provide referrals to organizations in the community that can be of assistance in order to ultimately develop a care plan. The support groups are wonderful. They are integral. They are what allow that caregiver to meet people that are in the same situation they are in. At the library, online, at a Zoom meeting, they can talk about their experience, their issues, their coping strategies in a very safe environment where it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be in a state of disbelief. It's okay to be sad. And also receive advice on what lies ahead and share and exchange that information about the community resources. This enables those caregivers to feel less alone and isolated, and it's a heartwarming experience. I have a number of volunteers that I have personally recruited that were once caregivers. They became widows or widowers, and they developed a whole new network of friends who went through the same thing they did at the same time. And it's a really beautiful thing because they're all they've all kind of recovered from the loss. It's been a number of years, and now they have this whole new network, and they want to volunteer, and they're so fabulous to talk to, because what I do is put them on the phone with someone who's going through what they went through, and it really opens up people's hearts and their minds, and they know that they can get through it because other people have. So the scholarship respite, you do have to qualify for it. There's an application and a process. It's up to $1,800 or a number of hours, whichever gets reached first. And it specifically has to be devoted towards in-home respite care or adult daycare or some kind of overnight respite. And then the volunteer aspect of the respite is what I do. I recruit volunteers, usually through the library, but also through just people that I know in various different communities where we have clients registered with us, and they are fully trained with training modules so that they really come to understand what the inner life is like for the person who has dementia and what the burnout is like for that caregiver. They pass an FBI background check, as well as medical clearance. And of course, now they have to be fully vaccinated. And we also don't allow our volunteers into the home of anyone who has not been vaccinated. We just don't do that. And they ultimately get matched with someone in their community, and they provide weekly social visits. And it's a wonderful thing. I did it myself before I came to work for Parker, and it was really great. The joint enrichment programs are the programs that encourage the caregiver to come out with the care recipient, to have a safe and social outing in the community. One of the things that we do is called a memory cafe. It's absolutely wonderful. I hosted one this week in Bethpage, and we're providing free lunches for a caregiver and a care recipient. Again, usually, a married couple. And they come and have lunch, and we have live music, and they meet all these other people, and they have a great time. So we can also link you to additional services that you might need, whether those be an elder care attorney or financial services or home care referrals. We have a whole database of people that we work with. And the benefits of giving these services to the caregiver is to give them that break for caregiving, so that they can address their own needs and be able to stay connected with family, friends, and activities, minimize burnout, lighten that burden a little bit, give them some education, some training, so that they in turn do not become depressed or isolated themselves, because it really, in certain stages, it can be very, very isolating. So there are a number of Alzheimer's organizations out there, one of them being the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, the Long Island Alzheimer's and Dementia Center, the ADRC, Alzheimer's Disease Resource Center, the Alzheimer's Association, and the Stony Brook Center of Excellence for Alzheimer's Disease, and of course, Parker. So please feel free to contact us. We're right here in New Hyde Park, 516-586-1507. You can follow us on Facebook or Twitter. We're not on TikTok yet, but I hope to get there. I've seen some wonderful posts on TikTok made by younger people filming their loved ones who have dementia, and it's really, really sweet. So we hope to collaborate with you, assist you in any way that we can. And we're always looking for volunteers as well. So perhaps the next time I'm out at the East Hampton Library doing outreach, I will get to meet some of you. And on a personal note, what I'd like to say about dementia, when I first went for my interview to become a volunteer, I had several years before that started practicing Zen meditation. And the two employees at Parker were describing what dementia is like. And I said, you know, it kind of sounds a little bit like Zen, because in Zen, every moment is brand new. So if we can bring that, the spirit of that, to our journey with dementia, it can be very helpful. So again, this program is supported in part by a grant from the New York State Department of Health. The grant did get renewed earlier this year for another 5 years, same budget. So it looks like we're in good shape to keep going. We have started up our memory cafes again about 2 months ago, and we also started in-person volunteer visits. Okay, so that concludes the presentation for today. I would love to open up the floor to anyone who has any commentary or questions they might want to ask.
We have a question from Stuart. At what point would the quality of life be better in a memory care facility, not considering financial?
At what point would the quality of life be better in a memory care facility? Can you repeat the question?
At what point would the quality of life be better in a memory care facility, not considering financial?
Oh, okay. So excluding financials, I think that usually a memory care facility, I mean, you're talking about removing someone from their home and placing them in an actual facility. That is usually, I would say, much later stages. Because there are places, a lot of places now, a lot of adult daycare programs that people can go to several days a week, and they're doing memory exercises with other people in classroom type settings that are working on their memory. And it's very heartwarming, and it gives that person with dementia some structure and something to look forward to, and it gives that caregiver some time. So I would say, you know, really later stages when you really want to place someone in a facility.
Let's see. We have somebody who asks, can you tell me things to do to avoid Alzheimer's?
Oh, well, yes. I'm not a doctor, but, and I have begun working on this myself, which is take impeccable care of your health and oxygenate your brain. Don't eat too much sugar. Sugar is terrible for the brain and the body. Drink water. Go very easy on alcohol and processed foods. I mean, this is, you know, basically what just about everybody's saying. And get exercise too. And create habits like new habits, creating new habits, learning new things, even if they're small little new things, blazes new trails in the brain, creates new pathways in the brain. So for example, some people like to do Sudoku, some people like crossword puzzles, some people like playing cards or playing chess, or taking up gardening. Gardening is wonderful, wonderful for the brain and the soul.
We have a few people asking if it's possible to get copies of the slides that
Oh,
were.
sure.
Okay, if you want to just email those to me, whenever
Yeah,
you get a chance.
I can email you the entire presentation.
And then I'll just share it with everybody who signed up, who was on the call this
Okay,
evening.
great.
And we have another question pertaining to, well, I guess it was answered in the previous question. Is there any way to delay the progress of Alzheimer's?
Right.
Would
Yeah.
be
It's
falling under.
really, I mean, it's really, it's about creating healthier habits. One thing I can say about what I know personally in my own life, my father is in later stages of dementia. He did not have Alzheimer's, he had dementia. And one of his parents had it when they were like in their late 60s, early 70s. His father, it wasn't that severe. He unfortunately passed away from a heart condition at 71. But something that my father did in his late 60s and 70s was study a new language. And that is really good for your brain. And I think it may have actually staved off the onset. He was diagnosed probably about 7 or 8 years ago. So like 79, 80. He was still able to do a lot of things back then. But I do think that taking a new language really helped him.
Yeah, I've seen from what I've observed and what I've encountered over the years, like hobbies and staying active have fantastic longevity, because I've seen people like well into their 90s doing volunteer work and just, being involved in things in their community and taking up a hobby of some sort. And it's just like, hey,
Yeah. Yeah, I do think we have more control than we realize. And I also think that it's important to have a good attitude no matter what, because your mental attitude towards things opens up creative solutions. And you can really create moments of joy from situations that other people might not be able to find that. Meditation is a wonderful thing. It's very good to oxygenate your brain. I recently started doing puzzles. I never liked puzzles. I hated puzzles when I was young. And I have more patience now as a middle-aged person. So this is something that is really good for my brain because it's something that I didn't like and that is not particularly easy for me. So I feel like that combination is probably helping me.
excellent. We have somebody who asks, from what I've seen, the main motivation for moving to memory care facility tends to be when the person keeps trying to unsafely wander, leaving their house unaccompanied and no longer remembering that it's even their house and trying to go home to a long ago residence. The memory cares tend to have a high security to prevent that.
Yeah, well, okay. So I'm glad this question came up because this was something additional I wanted to say before when I answered it, because it is a very personal decision as well. And if you're in a situation where it's actually going to be safer for someone who is a flight risk, and you're able to place them into a facility that's going to assist with that, then it is the best decision. We absolutely do have cases that become flight risks. We don't have a lot of them. But the important thing when dealing with someone who is, wants to flee, thinking about fleeing, is creating a sense of space around them, that the space that they're in is safe and that it's worthy of exploration. I'm not saying it's the easiest thing to do, because some people in later stages can get very, very agitated and they get they start clinging to the spouse. It can get really tough. So, have a family meeting, have a meeting with that person's friends, have a meeting with, talk to your community, your support system, talk to a social worker, that kind of thing.
And Suffolk County, if anybody ever needed a senior advocate, Suffolk County's Office of the Aging has a whole entire list. I just received the list of all the places. This is updated like every few months, but this is all the places in Suffolk County where you can find a senior advocate. They have Babylon Town, Brookhaven, East Hampton, and Huntington.
Mhm.
Also, there is another list for Nassau County, which we can print from offline, which gives places there where they have a senior advocate. That gives the name of the senior advocate, their contact, and the location. Some of them are at nutrition centers. Some of them are meeting at libraries, and some of them are meeting at various housing. But there are senior advocates out there if anybody needs any assistance with these sort of meandering through the paperwork and things that come along with that. We have a question: is Alzheimer's genetic?
They say that it is. It's been said that it is, that it does run in families. I've heard that about dementia. I've heard a lot of things. I don't know that it definitively is. I'm not a medical doctor. That's something I would definitely read up on. I do want to mention two books, actually. I have them sitting right here. The first one is called The 36-Hour Day. This is a fabulous book. I always bring it with me when I do outreach. And it is specifically designed for the family, written by a medical doctor and someone with a master's. And there's another book called A Dignified Life. And A Dignified Life, written also by an MSW and a master's in public health. Again, specifically for caregivers. These are very valuable resources. I also think sometimes the best resource is talking to someone who has already lived through it. Because you have to go easy on yourself. You have to have compassion for yourself. It's a very difficult situation to be in, and there's no, the only way is through compassion and education, as I see it.
We have a question: how to manage things when it is time to take the patient to hospice?
Yes, okay. Hospice care is something that you're going to talk to your social worker about. We do have hospice here at Parker. You can talk to your social worker, and you're also going to talk to your physician. Your physician's going to be able to tell you where you're at in that process. Most people can figure it out, but you want to get a definitive answer. And that's research that you're going to do, that you want to do ahead of time. You want to be prepared for that. You want to look into what kind of hospice care is available in your community, at your local hospital, whether you want to have the person have hospice at home. You can do that too. It's different for everybody.
I'd like to thank everybody for Zooming in this evening for this presentation. And I'd like to thank Jennifer for being able to provide us with the information. And what I will do is I will forward the slides to everyone that was on the presentation. And if you have any questions about resources, um, if you're zooming in from East Hampton, Suffolk County on the East End, there are plenty of resources at your local library, as well as in Nassau County. A lot of good resources at libraries. And we wish you all the best, and have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you to everyone. I can't hear you, but it's a pleasure to be here for you. I hope to meet you all sometime at the East Hampton Library.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.